When you're visiting the coast, it's natural to want to come home with a photo of the sea and the beach in front of you. But here, without any buildings or monuments or anything interesting in the foreground, it's just a bit of a plain shot. I don't feel particularly inspired by this. So in the absence of there being an interesting building here, I'm going to have to find something else to be the main subject of my picture, something to put in the foreground. And what I'm going to do is choose a smaller subject that still says beach and seaside to me. In this case, a pebble or a feather or a shell, something with some interesting textures and colours on it. And I'm going to get really close to it using the macro mode on the phone in order to really fill the frame with it. Some of these pebbles look quite nice. Got some interesting seaweed, but this shell has really caught my eye because it has a hole in it. It has a crack in it. And if I position it just right, I might be able to see something like the sea behind it, and that will really frame the shot interestingly. In this situation, don't be afraid to pose your subject as if it was a person or anything else on the frame. I can just pop it on top of a pile of pebbles here. There, that's looking pretty good. And then set the phone into its close-up macro mode. That's going to tell it to focus onto a subject that's very close to it. And then I'm just going to fill the frame. So here I've positioned the phone about as close as it's going to focus in its macro mode on this shell. And it's quite nice. I like this fall off of the pebbles behind it. So I'm going to take the picture anyway, but what I can't see here is the sea in the background. And if I want a picture that says I'm at the seaside, well, I really need that in the frame. So if I want to get the shell and the sea and the sky in the same picture, I simply need to get this camera much lower down in the frame. Now, since most phone cameras are positioned in a top corner, the easiest way to do this is to actually turn the phone upside down. And now the camera is pretty much at ground level, in this case looking up at the shell, and it's quite a dramatic perspective. That's quite a nice shot, although not exactly what I was after, and it's quite hard for me to view it here without getting really low down. So I'm going to go for a kind of in-between solution and hold the phone in a horizontal landscape orientation. I've got the shell, I've got the pebbles of the beach, and I've got the various horizon lines of the end of the beach, the sea, and the sky. So I'm pleased with this positioning here, and it's now just a case of making fine adjustments to frame it exactly right. If I want to get the phone even lower, I can dig out a bit more of these pebbles to get it lower down. And I'm also resting the phone on these pebbles to make it easier to hold nice and steady. And I can see that, in fact, I can look through the hole in the shell and see the sea behind it. I'm also going to now use the rule of thirds, which is using a grid on the screen to frame your shot, your subject, more aesthetically. I can either put it roughly here or maybe on the other side. I'm going to try that. I'm also using a leveling gauge on the screen to tell me when the phone is exactly straight, because when it's down here, it's very easy for me to take a picture where the sea is at a jaunty angle. Get just the right amount of sea and sky through that hole, make sure it's level, and take the picture. Here's the plain shot of the seaside, and well, it's pretty plain. Everything is far away. It's really lacking a subject in the foreground. It's just a boring bunch of stripes, so I'm not happy with that. In this shot, I found my subject, an interesting looking shell. I've positioned it as close as the phone would focus on it in its macro close-up mode. I'm getting some nice detail on it, but unfortunately, I've had to point the phone down in order to position it on the frame, and now it's just turned into a study of a shell. I can't actually see the sea or the sky behind it, so it doesn't really say seaside to me. Here I've positioned the phone and its camera much lower down in relation to the shell by turning it on its side and also digging a little channel for it in the pebbles, and this has allowed me to include some of the sea and sky in the top of the frame. But more importantly, it's also allowed me to shoot more through that hole and see some of that landscape through it. I've also positioned it in a more attractive part of the frame using the rule of thirds, and I've also used the leveling gauge to make sure that that horizon is as straight as possible. So this is good to post. It says to me, I'm at the seaside, and look at that interesting looking shell.